Longhorn Nation. We're back.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the Lone Star Lowdown podcast. My name is Matt Galatzan and I will be your host. And today I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and partner over there at Texas Longhorns on SI, Zach Dimmitt. Zach, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. Obviously, lots to cover today and tonight and the next day for the NFL draft. So lots to talk about.
Yeah, and great night for Texas last night. 3 guys go in the top 23 picks. And Texas ties a record in their program for most players taken in the first round, going back to 1980 when Lamb Jones, Johnny Johnson, and Derek Hatchett were all taken in the first round. Before we get into where Kelvin and Jade and Matthew Golden went, what do you think that means for the program to have that many players taken in the first round after years of kind of the last 2 years now they've had multiple players selected in the first round, and so they're kind of setting a new trend after waiting for so long for that to kind of be a consistent thing with their program. What do you think it means going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it means that Sark is building an elite program that we've already been seeing that, though. I mean, it's not any mystery. This is kind of inevitable. Once he made the turnaround from 5-7, then the Alamo Bowl the next year, and then the CFP, you can just kind of see it coming. And so it's really not too much of a surprise. Leading up to the draft, we kind of knew that, okay, these 3 guys would be first rounders. It was kind of a no-brainer. But what it means is that he's building an elite program that's going to be here to stay. And so that should make Texas fans feel really happy about what's to come for the future. But, it's really not too much of a surprise. We've really been seeing this building slowly but surely over the past couple of years. And, now the expectation is when you get to Texas that you have a chance to put your name in the draft. And so that's going to be a big recruiting tool. It already has been a big recruiting tool. And now there's even more proof to show to these guys that this is what you can do. When you look at someone like Matthew Golden, he was a solid player at Houston, but wasn't, household guy or anything, creating tons of buzz for himself. But as soon as he gets to Texas, he shows what he do and gets himself into the first round. It's pretty unbelievable. Really expect that necessarily last offseason transferred in. So the fact that is really impressive. Same with Jade, 5-year guy. Kind of started from smaller beginnings, Austin kid, but just kept working at it every single day. And you kind of feel the most satisfaction for him. Just me personally, because him being an Austin kid and seeing that for him. Kelvin Banks is really the only guy that from the start you were like, okay, he's probably going to be a first rounder second he steps onto campus. But happy for all those guys and excited to see what they do next year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And anytime you can do I'm trying to figure out how to pull this up. There we go. Yeah, anytime you can do something like this for your program, and you can use that as a tool. And we recruited this guy. We got him to be unanimous All-American, the Lombardi Award winner, Outland Trophy winner, top 10 draft pick. That's something special. I don't know if that actually showed up on our screen because it took up my entire screen. So hopefully it did. But Texas football is tweeting all of these graphics and videos with Jade and Kelvin and Matthew Golden and what they accomplished and what Texas did for them and everything that happened over their tenure in Austin. So that's always a great recruiting tool. Texas set a program record last year, and the following season they had the number 1 recruiting class in the country. I'm not saying that's going to happen again this year, but anytime these kids see that you're putting record amounts of players into the NFL and you're doing more and more and more every year, they're just going to keep on flooding to you. So great stuff for Texas there from a program standpoint. Now let's talk about each of these picks individually, because going into this, I don't think any of these guys ended up where we expected them to end up, which is pretty typical of the NFL draft. the scuttlebutt was that Kelvin was going to go to the Las Vegas Raiders. There was most mocks were sending him there. A lot of people had Jahdae Barron going to the Vikings or the Buccaneers, and then the Cowboys and the Texans were both really big destinations for Matthew Golden, along with the Seahawks. Well, Kelvin Banks ends up with the Saints, which was probably the most surprising of the three to me, because offensive line wasn't really a big talking point for the Saints in all these mock drafts as of late. It was all about edge rusher and quarterback. So they elect to go offensive line. They want to protect whoever I assume they're going to pick a quarterback at some point in this draft. My guess would be at number 40. Maybe that's a spot where Quinn could go. Maybe that's a spot where they pick Tyler Shuck or Jalen Milroe or something. But they elect to go safe. Kellen Moore in his first pick as an NFL head coach goes with the second most valuable position in NFL football, left tackle. I love this pick for Kelvin. I love this pick for the Saints. I think it's a great building block. What are your impressions of this pick, and how do you see Kelvin doing in New Orleans?
Yeah, I think when it comes to like top 10 picks, it kind of depends, but it's not necessarily about best fit, but just best player. And so, you can't go wrong with him. The only problem with New Orleans is, he's, going to be a great left tackle, but who the hell is he going to be blocking for? So, you just really, Rattler, not really the answer necessarily. I think he had some flashes last year, but you don't know who your quarterback's going to be with Derek Carr like they have for the season. So, but you got to start somewhere, and so I think that you can't go wrong with that. A lot of people are thinking and that's obviously we saw what happened with him. So can't go wrong with Kelvin at number 9, and he doesn't have to go too far from home to New Orleans, so should be good for his family. And just a side note, thought it was pretty hilarious that the NFL got him and Abdul Carter's faces mixed up on their little graphics. Kelvin got selected by the Giants, so that was kind of hilarious. But but that's beside the point. I think awesome for him, and they got the best player available, in my opinion, at that spot.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've been saying through this entire pre-draft process that he was, in my opinion, the best tackle in the draft. I thought he was a lock to be a top 10 pick. All these mock draft experts were, putting him in the 20s, and some, like, I even saw one mock draft where he wasn't a first round pick. I was like, what the hell are these guys watching? And it's very gratifying to know that the dumb podcasters and the dumb radio guys were right, and that mock draft experts were wrong. One thing that did kind of piss me off last night, though, was Mel Kiper Jr., because he said, well, he didn't really play up to his talent. It's like, what the hell were you watching? Like, honestly, what do you think he was watching? Because, like, we just went through it. Unanimous All-American, Outland Trophy winner, Lombardi Trophy, like all these different trophies. He cleaned up everything. He was the best tackle in America. He gave up 2 sacks all season long. Both of them came against Georgia. One of those was his fault. So, I don't get what the ESPN hate for Kelvin Banks is. I don't know if Kelvin Banks is, was supposed to go to wherever Mel went to college and flipped his commitment at the last second. I don't think Mel went to Oregon, but there's something there where he just doesn't like Texas players or Kelvin Banks. So I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't understand, because left no doubt, when you win these awards, when in the Outland, that's for both defense and offensive line. So you're up against a larger pool of players when it comes to that award. We saw Devondre Sweat win that, and he was a second-round pick, and so he left no doubt. It's not like he was just a finalist for these awards and and didn't win them or anything. No, he left no doubt. Like you said, he cleaned house. And I was kind of confused because Texas is kind of one of those teams that, ESPN, I would assume, likes because of the coverage that Texas gets and all that stuff. We are one of the biggest names on ESPN is now hating on a Texas guy is kind of a little bit surprising to me. Usually, you don't see that from. That's beside the point, but yeah, I guess he didn't watch a ton of Kelvin Banks film. Guess he didn't watch any Texas games. Too focused on stuff elsewhere. Probably best to just, you know, keep your mouth shut if you're Mel Kiper Jr. if you don't know what you're talking about. Because it's okay to have a different opinion than other people, but there was no base for him to go off of when it came to that at all. So that was pretty stupid.
Yeah, and you know, there was two other things that Mel was talking about all night long, and one of them was Shedeur Sanders. He would not shut up about Shedeur Sanders. It was driving me crazy. We don't care. Shedeur is not going to be the next Joe Montana or whoever you want to put on him. It's not going to happen. I don't understand it. Like the coverage of somebody who's falling into the second round because he's really not that good and he's got some personality issues that NFL teams have an issue with. Like, let it go. The last time that he died on a hill like that during the NFL draft was when he was banging his fist on the table for Jimmy Clausen being a first-round pick and the best quarterback in that class or whatever it was. It's like I just don't trust this guy's evaluations, but for quarterbacks, it's not. I don't buy it, Mel. Anyway, though, you know, we move on later in the first round, and Jahdae Barron gets selected a little later than I expected, but in a place that I had no expectation that he would end up, just because they already had some really good bodies in that area. He goes number 20 to the Denver Broncos, which, in my opinion, immediately makes them one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in the NFL. They have an elite secondary now. They already had a pretty good one. Now they have an elite one. They've got Pat Surtain the second at corner. They have Chris Abrams-Drain back there. And at safety, they have Talanoa Hufanga, Brandon Jones, PJ Locke, some former Longhorns. So it's basically NFL Texas edition. And I really love this fit for Jahdae Barron. I think he is going to be an excellent fit for what they like to do. They play a lot of zone. And Jahdae Barron was the highest rated corner in zone coverage in the country last year. So he is going to fit there tremendously. But he can also play man. He can play in the slot. He can play on the outside. He can do whatever they need him to do from a week-to-week basis. I think this is just an awesome fit for him. I love that Sean forgetting their head? Sean Payton. I love that Sean Payton is a big Texas fan, it seems like. So all around, I think this is an awesome fit. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I kind of forgot that there were so many Longhorns on Denver, and then they actually signed Sam Ehlinger this offseason too, so that adds another one to it. That's pretty crazy. So many Longhorns are going to be in Denver. You never know. Gunnar Helm, Colorado native, maybe he finds his way there later in the draft as well. But yeah, their defense was elite last year. That's kind of the reason that they were able to turn things around and make it to the postseason. I know they got eliminated, but that was like Denver's first postseason game or first postseason appearance, I believe, since the Super Bowl in 2015. And so, they already have a promising offense with Bo Nix leading the way, and you just want to beef up that defense as much as you can. And Jahdae, like you mentioned, did a little bit of everything during his time at Texas, and so he brings a lot of versatility there. And being able to learn under a guy like Brandon Jones, former Longhorn, PJ Locke, like you mentioned, Pat Surtain on the outside already. That's an elite secondary that should cause lots of problems, and it should actually put less pressure on. Sometimes if you're a first round corner, you're going to a team that's in need of that position. This is kind of the opposite. So to take pressure off him, he's not going to have to guard the number one guy. He can kind of grow and, growing pains as a rookie without having to, guard a star every single week. So I think it's going to be really exciting to see him in Denver. And, like I said, it'd be kind of nice to see Gunnar Helm add to that list of Longhorns.
Yeah, I mean, he did take a visit there in the pre-draft process, so it's certainly a possibility. I would love to see that. I would love to see, Jaden Blue potentially end up there as well, because I think they need a running back, and I think Jaden Blue could be not an every down back for them, but a guy who can come in and do some, some lightning type things for another, more every down back, and be a really good player in the mix there. And just as I thought that, my dreams were going to come true, and Matthew Golden was going to fall to the Texans, and that we were going to have that great story of him being a hometown kid and coming back home to Houston and all those things. The Packers swoop in and crush those dreams for everybody. I actually really do like this fit for Matthew Golden. I think it's a good one. Jordan Love desperately needed a number one target. And it seemed like the Packers were like a couple of pieces away from being a really, big contender in the NFC North. Now they get Matthew Golden, who, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know, was the number one target for Texas last year. Always showed up in the clutch. Can do pretty much everything you need a wide receiver to do. And now he has a chance to go to an NFL team that he's probably going to be the number one target again right off the bat. And it was such a cool moment last night too, because the draft was in Green Bay. Matthew Golden is in attendance for the draft. He gets picked by the Packers, and he gets to, soak it in with 200,000 people there, the majority of which are Packer fans, and, speak to the crowd and do all those different things. I thought it was really cool. And I love this fit for him. What are your opinions on the Golden fit, Zach?
Yeah. Like you said, that entrance epic. I was getting kind of chills a little bit because you don't really get to see that too much when it comes to these. Like, he was walking out there, and as he's slowly making his way out there, they're playing their little "Go Pack Go" little song, and I thought that was kind of cool. And then for a guy like him, he's a great guy during his time at Texas this past season, and so really happy for him and seeing his excitement there. But yeah, the fit is great. They have talented receivers, but it's not really worked out exactly the way they expected. Romeo Doubs had a little bit of drama there this past season with Matt LaFleur. They kind of got those things resolved, but definitely with some question marks there. Christian Watson has had problems with his hands, problems with injuries, and so he's shown potential, but it hasn't quite been what they expected. Dontavian Wicks has shown potential as well. But he's kind of been inconsistent. And, Jaden Reed is really the only guy that's been really explosive for them. I think him and Golden will probably be their top two targets. Jaden Reed probably, because of his experience, probably the number one guy going into the season, but Matthew Golden could easily surpass him, moving forward. But they got a lot of bodies in there. And yeah, it's hard to argue with, Golden being a guy, potentially. Pretty excited there, and you didn't really expect the Packers to kind of swoop in and get him. It wasn't really a team anyone expected, but I think it'll be really exciting for their guys NFC North. So
I agree. And another thing that I thought was really interesting was on Sports Center after the draft, while I was sitting there wrapping up some of our coverage, Nick Saban was on SVP, and he said, and SVP asked him, "Who do you think is going to be the most impactful player next season out of these first-round picks?" And he picked Matthew Golden. So that, nobody knows ball like Nick Saban. So that for Golden going forward. Okay, so before we get into some other draft talk, let's change gears for a little bit, and then we'll come back to it. Yesterday, Trevor Gooseby and Jelani McDonald met with the media. They kind of discussed spring football a little bit and talked about a few other different things. what were your big takeaways from what Gooseby had to say, and then we'll talk about McDonald in a minute.
Yeah, Gooseby, he's a really fun guy. He was laughing a bunch. He's really laid back, but he naturally he's kind of taken over that Kelvin Banks role, and he was asked about that. Is there any pressure on you to step in for Kelvin Banks? And he kind of admitted, yeah, there is a little bit of pressure, but I don't think it's going to phase him. He stepped in against A&M, a big time stage last year, in November, whenever Kelvin got injured, and the O-line didn't blink, and we all saw that, and that was a big reason why Texas was able to win that game. It wasn't the prettiest game at all, but they were able to put it away, in large part due to him stepping in against a pretty impressive defensive line that the A&M. He also had played against Georgia, I believe, in the SEC championship. Because Kelvin was inactive that game, so yeah. But this guy has already seen the big stage, and he's got a nice personality about him that makes it seem as if he's not going to be phased at all whenever those big moments hit next year. And so, I liked what he had to say, and it was kind of one of the first times you really get to hear from him during his time at Texas. And so, hopefully he'll be a guy that will continue to have an increased voice moving forward as a leader. And so, I think it's really positive that Texas has already an elite replacement for Kelvin Banks right after he gets drafted. So,
yeah, I have high expectations for Trevor Gooseby. Watching him in back-to-back weeks go up against arguably the two best defensive lines in the SEC and not blinking, like you said, and not giving up very many pressures at all. The first game was against A&M. He had to go up against Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner. All three of those guys are going to get drafted. And then one of them already did, actually. Shamar Stewart went to the Bengals around, I think 17 or 18, something. I think it was pick 17. And then Scorton and Turner are going to go probably day 2, maybe day 3 for Shamar Turner, but I expect day 2. And then you go to the Georgia game, and he just has to go up against Jalen Walker, who is who's a top 15 pick. And then, wait, there's Mykel Williams, who's number 11 pick. So it's just what he was able to do against that kind of talent with very little to no game experience in relief of Kelvin Banks was really impressive to me. So I think he's going to be a stalwart for Texas going forward. What about Jelani McDonald? What did Jelani have to say? I wasn't in attendance for this, so I didn't get to see much of it.
Yeah, he really expresses a nice confidence about himself. There's a big difference, between cocky and confident. You don't really see anyone from Texas really be cocky. That's not the kind of culture Sark implements. But he wants his guys to be confident, and Jelani is definitely confident. He did not mince his words when it came to what he feels about himself. He said he feels like he's there. He feels like he's an elite potential in the secondary. Just the way that he feels he's able to move and uses athleticism, obviously, former quarterback. So he said that kind of helps him read the defense a little bit more than maybe a guy who hasn't played the position would. So, you never know what's going to happen in a year, but he and Trevor Gooseby are two guys that'll be near the top of that list when it comes to Longhorns that could be drafted. And Michael Taft is probably the most important guy in the secondary next year, but Jelani McDonald will be the most talented guy for sure. And so hearing him have that confidence in himself as a guy that probably won't be phased by the moment is big time, because Texas has no shortage of talent, but when it comes to being ready for that moment, that's a different story. And so I think that he's gonna be ready for that for sure. And kind of a softer spoken guy, but I feel like he can emerge into a leader as well. They kind of need that with Makuba and Jade both out of that secondary. So I think there's exciting things for Jelani next season. Sark has been talking about him all spring already, so it hasn't really been a secret that he's one of the guys to watch. So should be really exciting for him next season.
Yeah, and he unlike Gooseby, he had an opportunity to play early last season and got to play in a lot of important games early on in his career. And he's such an athletic specimen that he's going to be able to do a bunch of different things for this defense. He could play a traditional safety spot. He could play in the star position. They could even move him down to linebacker on passing downs if they need to. I think he can do anything. So I'm really excited to see what he can do next season and how he impacts the secondary, which is going to be absolutely stacked with Derek Williams coming back, Michael Taff already there. Xavier Filsame is there. Jordan Johnson-Rubel is there. Then you got, and Malik Muhammad at corner, Jalen Gilbo at corner. I mean, this has a chance to be the best Texas defense we have seen in a very, very long time. So I'm really excited for that. And Jelani McDonald's going to be a big part of it. All right, why don't we jump back into the draft? Rounds 2 and 3 are today, and then rounds 4 through 7 are on Saturday. It's going to be kind of hard to predict what goes on in rounds 4 through 7 because it's always a crapshoot. But let's talk a little bit about rounds 2 and 3. Texas did have 3 players taken in the first round, but there's still a ton left on the board, a lot of whom could go in between rounds 2 and 3. I have a couple names that I think could have their names called tonight. More than a couple, I guess, probably 3 or 4 who I think could get their names called tonight. And then, the rest I have through rounds 4 and 7. I'm not quite as sure. There's a big wild card in there, but let's start with – I'll tell you what. Let's start with your expectations, Zach. How many Horns do you think are going to go in rounds 2 and 3? And then we'll get into where we think they're going to go here in a bit.
Yeah, I'm going to make sure I don't miss anyone. So we got probably Quinn, Jaden Blue, Alfred Collins. I'm not sure. It's very possible that none of those guys get selected in round 2, but maybe the beginning of round 3. I think you had mentioned it. New Orleans could potentially take a swing for a quarterback at 40, but that may be a little bit too high for where Quinn's projected. So, probably you never know. Things can be surprising, but that'd be definitely interesting if they pair him with Kelvin as 2 guys like potentially the franchise down the road. But I do think that Jaden Blue has lots of late second round value as well. Ability and all that during his time at Texas. And so you just never know. Cowboys at 44. This one mock draft has them projected to get Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State. That'd be very interesting for Dallas. But, let's say he goes off the board before that. Did they feel comfortable adding Jaden Blue, to a backfield that already has Javonte Williams from Denver as well? So, it's all a guessing game, but you never know how these things are going to play out. But, Alfred Collins, I know he had that walking boot on pro day, but probably no reason to feel too concerned about that at this point, And so I don't think there's gonna be any injury concerns from teams about him. But it's possible that we don't see any of these guys go in the second round, and maybe right at the beginning of the third, we see a flurry of some of these names that we're familiar with going off the board. But it really is just a guessing game. But I'll take a guess. It goes off the board by the end, maybe to the Chiefs at 63. There could be a string of running backs go off the board at that point. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it just kind of looking at the selections here, and I'm kind of tired of looking at mock drafts, so I'm burnt out on it, let's say, and so I'm just going to go through the picks here and sort of extrapolate where I think at least Quinn. I have a better idea for Quinn than I do for Jaden Blue or Alfred Collins. I do think all 3 of them will be day 2 picks. I think that there's an outside shot that Andrew Makuba could be a day 2 pick. But from there, I think everybody else is probably a day 3 pick. Maybe Gunnar Helm if a team really likes him. But I think you're probably going to see 4 Longhorns selected today at some point at the most, probably 3 with Blue, Quinn, and Alfred Collins. There's a couple spots that jump out to me for Quinn right off the bat. 40 to the Saints, like you mentioned. That might be a little high, but I think that he would be a good fit there. Another one that's probably a little high, but I could still see it happening is the Raiders at 37, just because of that Pete Carroll connection. I think that would be really hard for considering, they got their running back in round 1. I have like their next big need is a future QB. That's why Shedeur Sanders was mocked there a few times. And that's why they've had, other QBs in other mock drafts that have been projected there as well. So I think that could potentially be a spot. It's a little bit harder to see. One that really jumps off the page, actually 2 that really jump off the page to me are the Rams at 46, where, you already have Matthew Stafford. You want to get a long-time backup. Quinn could go into LA and learn from Matt Stafford and Sean Payton, and I think that would be the best possible scenario for him. And then a year or 2 from now, Matthew Stafford retires. Quinn gets to take over the reins, and he's in a really good spot. The other one is it's really 2 picks also. It's 50 and 52 are both owned by the Seahawks, and there's been a lot of connections there for Quinn already. So I think that those could be a couple spots that he could go. And then if you bounce back to round 3, 68 to the Raiders and 71 to the Saints are those are probably more realistic spots if Quinn's going to go to one of those 2 teams. Pittsburgh at 83 would be very interesting because they need a quarterback, and they passed on Shedeur Sanders to the shock of everyone but me. And then 90 to the Rams also, I think, would be a good spot for him. And the Seahawks also have a 3rd-round pick. So, those are kind of the teams that I'm thinking of for Quinn. You got the Rams, the Seahawks, the Saints, potentially the Steelers, and the Raiders. So there's 5 different spots where he could end up. I like pretty much all of them. As long as he doesn't end up in Cleveland or with the Jets, I'll be okay. And I guess I would also really hate if he went somewhere like the Eagles, but I don't think that's very possible.
Right.
And then we move into no, go ahead.
Just gonna add really quick. Yeah, I don't think Pittsburgh has a 2nd-round pick at all. So if he in 2nd round, I think it was 83. You said for Pittsburgh, that seems pretty realistic. They still have not addressed quarterback at all. They need to start somewhere. So. That sounds really interesting to me. Seattle, like you said, there's a lot of smoke with them and Quinn, but they get a pretty crowded room. You could see them taking a swing eventually, but they got to address some of those things. Already got Sam Howell, Drew Lock, and Sam Darnold. They're gonna add a 4th guy and then trade one of the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how it goes, but I just wanted to throw that in there real quick.
Yeah, no, good shout. I think the thing with the Seattle thing for me is I understand it's a crowded room. I don't think Sam Howell is going to be a factor in whatever they decide to do regardless. I don't know that they are – I know that they signed Sam Darnold. They didn't sign him to like some long-term huge mega deal. So I don't know that – I think they're kind of like, okay – you had one good season with Minnesota. Let's see if you can do it again.
Right.
So is he going to be Minnesota Sam Darnold, or is he going to be the Sam Darnold that we saw for the last few years? That's the only question I have with them at quarterback. But I agree. Like as it stands, it's a pretty crowded room. So of those teams, they're probably the most or the least likely to take a quarterback, especially in round 2. And we move on to Jaden Blue. I think he's probably a 3rd-round pick. I've seen him go as high as number 55 in some mock drafts, which would be to the Chargers. That's the highest I've seen him go so far. I think that would be an interesting fit. They already picked Amarian Hampton. They have Najee Harris. Do they want to add a change of pace back? That's a possibility. But they're like a guy like Jaden Blue could go pretty much anywhere just because of his skill set. He's not going to be an every down starter. He's going to be the guy that comes in and is a change of pace and on passing downs and get some special teams work and those kinds of things. So hard to predict where he might end up. Alfred Collins, though, is the more interesting name to me because I think he has a chance to be a really, really, really good NFL player because at Texas, he was just starting to scratch the surface of his potential in his final year with the Longhorns. So he's just now getting to that point. Now he's going to go to the NFL and be developed by NFL defensive line coaches and that kind of thing. I think he's going to go before Quinn or Jaden Blue, personally. I could see him ending up, somewhere like San Francisco or, I know Dallas fans won't want to hear it because they desperately want a running back or a wide receiver in round 2. I hope they pick a running back or a wide receiver. Like, please, for the love of God, they need offense. But it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility for them to go with a lineman again. I mean, they've done it before when they needed other stuff with Mozzie Smith and Taco Charlton, and now they're sitting there with the 44th pick, and they do need a defensive tackle at some point. So he's a possibility there. But honestly, the fit that I like for him the best is towards the end of the second round with the Kansas City Chiefs, because he would have a chance to learn from a guy like Chris Jones, and he'll play early and he can be productive early. And then when Chris Jones, moves on, which he won't be there forever, then Alfred Collins can kind of assume that role. Are there any fits for Jaden Blue or Alfred Collins that you like specifically?
Well, I was eyeing some for Jaden Blue at the back end of the second round, like I mentioned, Kansas City and Buffalo. We obviously have seen Kansas City utilize their running backs in tons of different ways. They never really have one true RB1. Isaiah Pacheco has kind of been that guy for them, but we've seen that they like to switch it up a lot, and so adding him into that offense with Mahomes, that seems really interesting to be honest with you. But then with Buffalo, James Cook not reporting to camp, he get a new contract, so they kind of already have a receiving back with Ty Johnson. He had some nice productivity last season as a receiver, so maybe Buffalo isn't realistic from personnel standpoint, but I think Kansas City is probably most interesting for sure out of those two. And I thought it was worth mentioning that this for SI, he has a mock draft where he has a Makuba and Alfred Collins going in the second round. Makuba as high as where is it? Makuba to the Buffalo Bills at 62. So that'd be pretty high for him, and would add him to a secondary that just added the Kentucky cornerback, forgetting his name at the moment, but
Maxwell Hairston, yeah.
Right. Yes. Adding both of those guys to the secondary, that's pretty scary for Buffalo, for a team that has already been right on the cusp of a Super Bowl. So, we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I think the back end of that second round is where you really want to be watching these guys for Texas specifically. The first part of the second round, probably not going to see any of those guys go off the board unless it's maybe Quinn, someone reaching on Quinn early. But yeah, definitely the later part of today, well, the third round today as well, but the later part of the second round today, definitely to keep a place to keep eyes on.
Yeah, and I don't know that, I feel like Makuba could sneak into round 2 or round 3. I don't know that there's another Longhorn that can. Maybe Gunnar Helm. Vernon Broughton could have a chance as well. Everything I've seen is that Cam Williams is a 4th round pick, so I'm not sure about that either. But I still, all those guys are going to get drafted, obviously, and then you still have Jake Majors and David Benda, Hayden Connor, Gavin Holmes, Silas Bolden, guys who could have a chance from rounds 4 through 7. I think Majors and Connor are definitely going to get picked, just because getting an offensive lineman in those rounds is such a free shot. You pick the guy in that round, and if he works out, then great. If he doesn't, he's on the practice squad or whatever. So I can see both of those guys for sure. David Benda, I'm not as confident about, but I think he's got a chance just because he's such an athletic guy. And then there's one guy who, we're not going to talk about it a lot because it's kind of a sensitive subject, but Isaiah Bond. I saw a mock draft today with him going in the 3rd round. I don't know if the person who did that mock draft forgot what happened or not, or if he just decided, you know what, he's a first-round talent, so he's probably going to go just a lot later than anybody expected. I don't know. Do you think he's going to get picked at all? And if he does, do you think it's day 2 or day 3?
I do think that he'll be picked. With the legality of it all, it's impossible to predict exactly what teams are viewing him as. I feel like day 3 is probably the best bet. A 3rd round pick is so valuable, and a team isn't going to want to take a risk necessarily on a guy that's in the middle of some really concerning stuff right now. So I think day 3 is probably where he's going to land. He's still got tons of talent, tons of speed, and you never know. The legality of the situation could work itself out, and maybe he's seen in a different light down the line. But I'm obviously not an expert on that, so I'm not going to speak on that necessarily. But you never know how those things work out, and but I think a team will see his talent and be willing to work through the league, and feel like it's worth the risk in later rounds. And I hope it works out for him. I hope that a team is willing to take a chance on him, that whole situation gets worked out for the best. But we'll see how it goes. I just think that it's hard to see him go undrafted. Too much speed and too much talent there. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, NFL teams are just going to stop caring and they're going to take a risk. I thought for a while that he wouldn't get drafted, but then, as I'm sitting there last night and this morning kind of thinking about where all these players could go, I remembered that the Georgia defensive tackle, Jalen Carter, got in a drunk driving accident and killed a guy, and he was in the top 10. So I don't think NFL teams care that much when it boils down to it. So that could be a sign for Isaiah Bond that he could be a day 3 pick. At the end of the day, though, I have 13 Longhorns that are going to get drafted, with a possibility of as many as 15. But I think 13 is probably the more likely number. That's still a program record. And you eclipse that number from last year, which was already a program record, by 2 more players. And so, I've got obviously Banks, Barron, and Golden, and then Quinn, Jaden Blue, Alfred Collins, Makuba, Gunnar Helm, Vernon Broughton, Cam Williams, Jake Majors, Hayden Connor, and Isaiah Bond. So that's 13 players, and I think that if that ends up happening, Steve Sarkisian is going to be a very happy camper. What do you think?
Yeah.
How many you got?
Well, I said it on yesterday's show. I think that my bold prediction is that Gavin Holmes gets drafted. So I believe that'd make it that 14. And then I also had added that I don't think it's going to be, a bold prediction if Silas Bolden gets drafted. So that'd be 15 right there. We'll see what happens. I think Silas definitely has a better chance over Gavin Holmes. But yeah, you never know. It could be one of those late 7th round picks. One of these guys goes off the board, and then that makes it a 15, I believe, if you have those 2 guys. So it's gonna be really hard for Texas to break that record again next year. Probably gonna be impossible just because there's so much youth on next year's team. But you never know. A few years down the line, add some more veterans. Some of these guys. Grow into their roles, you could see that record be pushed once again in the coming seasons. But yeah, I think tomorrow will be later tomorrow in the 7th round will be a time to watch to see if that record can really get smashed, because it's it's pretty inevitable it's going to get broken at this point. So
yeah, and let's not forget Bill Norton, Jermaine Lelay are also
right.
out there. They have a shot. So could be a very big weekend, very big Saturday for the Longhorns, very busy Saturday for us. But yeah, let's call it there. That's going to do it for another edition of the Lone Star Lowdown podcast. You can listen to us pretty much on every major podcast platform out there, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or any of your favorites. We're also live on X, Facebook, and YouTube every day around 10 a.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. So you can catch us there as well. Also, don't forget to check out Texas Longhorns on SI for all your latest news and notes regarding Texas Longhorns sports. And if you enjoyed the podcast here today, make sure to hit the like button and the sub button on your favorite platform. Most importantly, be sure to tell somebody you love them, and we will see you on the next one.
Sir, we'll be back. Yes, sir.
Fight.